All right, thank you for staying with us. The House of Representatives is reviewing a bill to amend the 1999 Constitution, aiming to make the Court of Appeal the highest authority for resolving disputes related to governorship, National Assembly, and State Houses of Assembly elections. The bill, which was sponsored by a lawmaker from Delta State, Nnamdi Ezechi, has passed its second reading. The proposed amendment targets Section 246 of the 1999 Constitution, specifically subsection 3. If approved, the bill would delete the current subsection 3 and replace it with the new provision stating that the Court of Appeal's decisions on governorship, National Assembly, and State Houses of Assembly election petitions will be final. This move aims to address delays and excessive costs associated with post-election litigation, which often reach the Supreme Court. But joining us for this conversation is lawyer and public affairs analyst, Fred Zako. Fred, good morning. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Now, let's get your perception of the decision of the National Assembly to perhaps address this matter of litigation. We have seen prolonged cases in the court. Some persons would have even began their duties as governor or taking their positions, and would then see a court matter saying they have to, be removed at the end of the day. But how will this change the dynamics of our electoral processes from your perspective?
Thank you. Good to be. Thank you. Good to be with you. Of all the amendments that the House seeks to make to the Constitution and to the electoral process, the most critical one, before I go direct to your question, the most critical one that they must ensure that it goes through is that all election litigations must end before swearing in of anybody to the office of the president or vice president or to the office of the governor or deputy governor. That is very, very important. And I'm happy that should not fail, because that is key to the sanity of our electoral process. Now, straight to your question. Republic in 1979, the appeal of governorship election ended at the Court of Appeal.
All right, we're still hoping that our guest would join us to continue this conversation. I really want to understand how this will change the dynamics, and he was about to give us a historical perspective to this move, talking about how it is that initially, this is not even the first time initially that this matters, talking about electoral processes for governorship, used to end at the Court of Appeal. Then what changed? What happened? Perhaps, you know how our politicians are, and they want to exhaust every opportunity that they can explore to get to the root of the matter and feel satisfied, that feeling of satisfaction that they exhausted all of the opportunities to get the results.
Absolutely. I try to think of this, issue as a game with 3 referees. Where you have on the football pitch, you can relate with football very well. When you have 3 referees, and then the first referee, you go to the first referee, they said, no, this is the case. You go to the second referee, you're not satisfied, you go to the second referee, say this is the case, and then you go to VAR, which is supposed to be the last referee. So if you now remove the last referee, the question to now ask is, will the second referee be good enough? So that would definitely open a whole lot of things, a whole lot of questions, for Nigerians. Of course,
because even the VAR, a lot of people still question it up to today.
But you know that what the VAR shows is different from what the referee, the 2 other referees.
Of course, it gives you a better view exactly of what is going on.
Right.
But I hear our guest is back. Fred, can you hear me? All right. We see it seems the network is not helping us this morning. But we're talking about the VAR and how it is that it gives you a better view of how perhaps a goal was scored or whatever happened on the pitch, because the referee cannot see the way the VAR will see.
That's right.
And so for humans, when it comes to matters of election, you know how we are in this part of the world, that election is more of a do or die affair to an extent, because everybody puts out all their arsenal to ensure that, okay, we achieve the result. And you're now saying we should just leave it to the appeals court. Do we have that structure and standing? Recall that after the 2023 election, I think, that we had conflicting judgments from appeal courts.
That's right.
And that also raised concerns, even amongst legal practitioners, saying that what really is going on. In fact, that began the matters around people raising eyebrows and people paying attention to the decisions of our courts, saying what's really going on, how courts of competent jurisdiction and all of that are having conflicting judgments at the end of the day, what really is going on. I hear that Fred is back now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Now, you were trying to give us a historical perspective to how we got to this point.
Yes, absolutely. Because in the times past, 79, 99, 2003, 2007 elections, the appellate court, the Court of Appeal, was the last court, the last bus stop on governorship, gubernatorial appeals that are arising from the tribunals. But following the 2010 amendment of the Electoral Act and the election of 2011, the Supreme Court had to assume that final jurisdiction. You recall the altercation and the brickbat between the then Chief Justice of the Federation, the Honorable Justice Aloysius Katsina Alu, and the then President of the Court of Appeal, Honorable Justice Ayo Issa Salami, to the extent that Issa Salami was promoted to the Supreme Court by the National Judicial Council, and he refused to go upstairs, saying that he was comfortable as the President of the Court of Appeal because all election issues arising from the governorship election ended at his court. But then Supreme Court now took over in the era of Honorable Justice Aloysius Katsina Alu, that this election petition issues and appeal will now cascade up to the final court in the land, the apex court. Now, there are merits and demerits of each one. Those who are proposing that it stops at the Court of Appeal are looking at costs.
Ms. Ansako, are you there? All right.
Court of Appeal.
Yeah, carry on.
Yes, they seem to forget the fact that the divisions of the Court of Appeal tended to give judgments that are not in concordance, what you call variegated judgments on same and similar issues. You mentioned the issue of Plateau State, whereby if not for the Supreme Court, the governor today would have lost his seat on account of the judgment of the Court of Appeal. So in a sense, it widened our jurisprudence and sharpened it a lot more by the involvement of the Supreme Court. So I do not support such move. I personally do not support such move because of the challenges we have today at the level of the Court of Appeal. Even though there are also challenges at the level of the Supreme Court, but at least the Supreme Court will be there to correct any error, any judicial error that was committed at the level of the Court of Appeal. And but what is critical, like I said at my intro, which I don't know whether the freezing network allowed you to hear me, was that of all the amendments that are sought to be made to the Constitution towards our electoral jurisprudence and electoral process The most critical one is the one that will allow all election petitions and appeals, all litigations to be concluded before anybody is sworn in. Until we do that, we cannot get the very best out of our courts, because the politicians, once they assume office as the governor or as the president, there is a fear or a tendency that they will use state resources to fight for their personal political interests once they have been sworn in office. And that is why many people say that the governors or the president, once he has assumed office, will now have a lot of finances in his command and in his control that will be so tempted that such a fellow will be tempted to undermine the process and be tempted to compromise the officials of the court. Right. So if we want to stop that, then we must ensure that all litigations must end before any swearing in. And of course, it makes sense because it does not help our democracy that a governor will be going to court while administering the state, defending his mandate while administering the state. Not only that, it creates a lot of distraction, it also creates a lot of bad blood on account of the insinuations and the accusations of inducement, which the ordinary citizen, the common man on the street, will have against the governors and also against the judiciary. So if you want to solve a problem, you will solve it from the foundation. The foundational issue is that the governor must be completely cleared by the judicial system before he is sworn in. And I tell you that once that is done, the spate of litigation will minimize. And if you now tie it up with ensuring that the electoral process is clean, because after the 1993 election, the one that was adjudged the freest and the fairest, there were very minimal litigation, if any. That's right. After the 1992 election. Recall that the Humphrey Wosuk NEC then had conducted the election into the state houses of assembly and the National Assembly and governorship election. The one that produced in our Lagos State, Chief Michael Otedola, and then in other states, similar names like that. In Anambra, that was when we have Chief Chukwemeke Zeife. And the election had very minimal litigation. That was because the election was adjudged very free and very fair. So you will start from the foundation to ensure that INEC conducts very credible election. And I tell you that if INEC conducts very credible election, and if the courts now do their very best, even the Supreme Court may not need to be activated, and people may not even want to go up to the Supreme Court. Right. But going by the present, of our time, present trend that we have today, then there may be need for the elections to get up to the Supreme Court.
Now, let's try to see, because as things stand now, we also need to look at international, maybe, global best practices, but we have to look at how we compare with other countries like, United States, United Kingdom. Kenya, for instance, holds their own, they go to Supreme Court directly and they do it within the space of 14 years. We saw that judgment, done on a live television, which was, witnessed by majority of us. But currently, Appeal Court has more than 5,000 pending cases on its table. Do you feel that this load for Appeal Court, with the current bill, if it has to stop at Appeal Court, do they have that, wherewithal, that strength, or that ample time to handle this case?
All the courts in Nigeria, I can tell you, their dockets are full up to the Supreme Court. And that is why there is a lot of delay of justice delivery in the country. Because the way our system is structured, even so many cases that should have been handled under alternative dispute resolution mechanism, they end up in court because of the nature of the Nigerian people. I have seen several cases where even arbitration, when arbitration finishes their assignment and then they give the arbitral award, people who ordinarily had submitted to arbitration will now deny the arbitral awards, and they will want to resign from what ordinarily the arbitral award has asked them to do. and that will now bring them up to the court system again. So it is the nature of our people. There is this kind of lack of respect for constituted systems and lack of respect for agreements. In some cases, when people even have verbal agreements, they tend to respect it when they are when in an environment of integrity and honor. But that is very lacking, very scarce in Nigeria. Integrity and honor are scarce commodities in the country, and then they are most essentially scarce terribly among politicians. So by the time you look at the dockets of the court, the assignments, the when you now work with, then you see that sometimes it is important that we expand the system and ensure that we help our system by creating more and more opportunities for quick dispensation of justice.
All right, Mr. Nzako. Well, one of the aim for this move of trying to amend that section 246 subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution as amended is to address delays and excessive cost, like you rightly mentioned earlier. But you mentioned something that I'd like to pick on earlier as well, talking about judicial error, addressing matters of judicial error. That is why they take these matters to the Supreme Court. And that begs the question as to, does that mean that we haven't standardized appellate processes for election petitions? That is why we are seeing errors at that level. Why should we even be having judicial errors in the first place? In 79 that you mentioned, does it mean that there were no judicial errors at that time and the standards were in place? Are you also saying that the standards for addressing judicial matters have dropped? Mr. Nzako, are you there? All right, these are critical questions I would really love for him to address. Right. I mean, if we are saying, okay, we are taking these cases to the Supreme Court to address in case there are judicial errors, why is there a judicial error in the first place? And if we did not have that in the 79s, does that mean that there was a standard maintained then that we are not seeing now, and that is why we are witnessing matters of judicial errors? Remember that while we're looking through the papers, we're talking about the CJN, Justice Kudirat Kekereakun, talking about ethical standards and all of that, how it needs to be upheld. And when they were at the annual lecture of the body of benchers, something obviously has changed. And everyone wants to, look at how they can exploit those changes. From my perspective now, I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I think. So does that mean that there are loopholes in our appellate processes that he is trying to point out from the matter, talking about judicial errors?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, those are at the bar, is a bench, the bench, the judges, or justices, they are humans. Even though they say that Supreme Court, for instance, is not that the decision make at the Supreme Court level is not that the Supreme Court is not infallible, but it is infallible because it is final. I hope I get that right. Yeah. So at the end of the day, these are men. We are prone to errors. It's only God that cannot make errors. But if there are errors, courts of coordinate jurisdiction at the federal high courts, appeal courts, all of that, giving conflicting judgment. So we expect that the Supreme Court is supposed to be a unifier, as this man says in his book, Constitutional Issues in Nigeria, Kende Moro or something, Monwe. Saying that your Supreme Court needs to be a unifier. So it's meant to unify all of these conflicting judgments so that we'll have a singular judgment and then everything will be unified at the end of the day, and which will boost trust and confidence in the judiciary. But if they now stop at appeal courts, what are we going to see? Will people trust the process and all of that? We understand is back.
All right. Mr. Anzako, if you can hear me, I was asking earlier that I want to take you up on something you mentioned, why there is the need to, not allow or perhaps still move to the Supreme Court to addressing matters of election or electoral processes. And you mentioned judicial error. And I was saying that, does that mean that we haven't standardized our appellate processes for election petitions such that we can have a uniformity in judicial decisions? Is that what you are saying? Or is it that the standards that we used to have... You can't hear me? Can you hear me?
The line is frozen.
All right.
Can you hear now?
Can you hear now?
Oh.
Unfortunately, the lines are not allowing us speak with him as much as we want. But I really need him to clarify this matter. We need to have, that standards, because this matter of trust in our judicial processes and also institution is really something that we need to talk about, because after the 2023 election, we've seen a drop in it, and a lot of people were setting statements that were not really good. You see that we talk about the courts or the judiciary being the final hope of the common man. That's right. It is, a lot of them seems to have lost hope in our judicial processes. And we know that our politicians also have a role to play in this whole matter, because the people are meant to vote you in. And if you feel that, the votes don't count, that it is the courts that will settle it, what then happens to the people who came out to vote, which is another issue regarding this matter?
Yes, but I feel one thing they're also driving at is to ensure that there is, since we have the National Assembly, we have the reps and the Senate, terminating at the appeals court, they want the governorship to also terminate there, so that we only have the president election going up. I think it's
Mr. Nsako, can you hear me now? Mr. Nsako, can you hear me now? Obviously, he still can't hear me. We're talking about the last hope of the common man.
Yes. So I feel if it's just for them to see that they want to expedite actions on this, and to also save costs, and to not waste our time. But
as a politician, if I have the money to spend, allow me spend it. That's what a lot of them would say. Because it's their right. For some of them, it seems like you are infringing on their right.
That's right.
To explore every options that they can explore at the end of the day. But perhaps the National Assembly will need to make this clearer to our politicians. It's important, because they are the ones that are really at the heart of whatever decision they are making right now.
I think I agree with Mr. Fred Izako, who said that all of litigation, every issue, all the case, that has to do with governorship or anything, should be done with before the election.
All right, I hear he's back now.
Each time I wanted to talk, he's always
Mr. Nsako, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Great. I was asking about the matter of judicial error that you mentioned earlier, why these matters need to go to the Supreme Court to check if there are any judicial errors at the appellate level. And I was asking that, does that mean that we haven't standardized our appellate processes for election petitions such that we should have a uniformity in judicial decisions? Like we saw in the 79s that you mentioned, did the standards drop?
Well, the standards are still there, but the personalities changed. And there's a lot of desperation among the political class, a lot of it. Of course, you will recall that for each subsequent election, we get to see more and more desperation among the political class. And that desperation usually leads them to do the unthinkable things of trying to compromise the judicial system. And because of the variegation of opinions and judgments coming from the Court of Appeal, it affects the standardization process that had been set. And then also because possibly as human beings, possibly because the justices of the Court of Appeal know that there is another room upstairs, which is Supreme Court. They may not want to be as strict as they used to be, or be as very careful as they used to be in times past. And hoping that at the worst case scenario, you will go upstairs to the Supreme Court. But if that is the case, if the standard has dropped, of course, the CJN alluded to that when he said that the standards are dropping. Of course, the standards are dropping, and nobody will deny that. So, but because the Supreme Court, even at the level of the Supreme Court, the current justice of Supreme Court said not to be as top-notch as some of their predecessors of the past, when you mention certain names in the glorious days of the Supreme Court. And it is not because the system has changed, but because of the level of desperation among the political class. And that is why it is important that we exhaust all litigations, exhaust all from up to the Supreme Court before anybody is sworn in. Because we notice from experience, historical experience, that the inducements come, the lowering of standards come, the attractions come after officers has been sworn into office. And I can tell you that that now places one man at an advantage position over others. And it is not only unconstitutional, because it leads to giving unfair advantage to anybody who has been sworn in. And then it also leads to INEC not being thorough in their work, because they will always believe that you go to court if you don't like what they have done. And even in the court, you continue to go on appeal if you are not comfortable with what's done at the lower court. So to nip all these challenges in the bud, let everybody on your own, with your own energy and your effort, that same energy that you used to campaign, go and exhaust your litigation in court, up to the Supreme Court, before you are sworn in. I tell you that once we start that process, so many cases on their own will not go up to Supreme Court. Because by the time they finish the tribunal, finish at the Court of Appeal, a lot of them will tell themselves the home truth and go home. But that is if INEC has intentionally conducted credible election that will be less rancorous, and that will be present less attraction for people to go to the courts.
All right, let's quickly put you on hold, Mr. Nzako, and take a break. National Assembly looking to amend Section 246, subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution as amended with regards to the matters of taking electoral cases to the court. And they are looking at ensuring that all matters of electoral processes with regards to the governorship, National Assembly, and the likes end at the appellate court. We still have Fred Nzako here. Now, Fred, before we went on the break, you spoke about INEC ensuring that it carries out a transparent, free, fair, credible election. And I am wondering, as it is, now a lot of Nigerians who are the electorate are beginning to say, you know what, our vote doesn't count. When we vote, at the end of the day, we see these people going to the courts. Aren't we unconsciously or subconsciously or gradually eroding this cross-section of people in the chain of our electoral processes who are critical to the results at the end of the day? Fred, can you hear me? Fred, can you hear me?
I just hear you now.
All right,
and it keeps coming and going.
Okay. Let's manage the network as quickly as possible. Right. I asked a question based on your last statement before we went on break, that you talked about the matter of INEC ensuring that it carries out a transparent, free and credible election, as against it saying go to court if you are dissatisfied with the outcome of the election. And I'm asking that the cross-section of the people, the electorate, who are critical to the end result at the end of the day, aren't we gradually eroding them from the processes if we keep harping on the matters of going to court?
Yes, because the elections are supposed to be lost and won at the polling units. That is the most critical. The most critical point in our electoral process is the polling unit, and people are supposed to win or lose elections there, because that is where the people, the electorates, determine who to give their mandate through their voting. So if that is not clinically and correctly done, every other thing will just be to try to correct the errors. And that is why it lies on the INEC to conduct a very good election. And it lies on the people to also help INEC to do what is right. Because I keep saying that no election it can be good if INEC does not make it good. Sometimes it is out of their sheer intentional act. Sometimes it is out of their omission, and sometimes it is out of their being overwhelmed. But INEC has been experienced enough that the idea of being overwhelmed has been removed from their challenges. What they have not been able to overcome is the intention to do what is right. And once they intentionally do what is right and stand strong and supported by the people who come to vote, I tell you that the litigation will reduce. And even when there are litigations, fine, because it is enshrined in the Constitution. People can go to court to ventilate their anger and then assert their rights. Then you go to court. But you must exhaust that before anybody is sworn in. And that is fundamental to the sanity that we seek to achieve at the level of the electoral jurisprudence.
That's right. Well, it is not a done deal yet, and the bill has just passed the constitutional review stage, committee review. I mean, having that conversation on the floor of the National Assembly, second reading. But do you not think that there might be a hurdle, or what hurdles do you consider might happen? Because we've seen this during the electoral reform in 2021, where it failed to reach two-thirds of the states' assemblies, where you only have you need 24 out of 36. What are the hurdles that you think might stall these plans to ensure that litigations don't get to the Supreme Court regarding the governorship election?
Well, you know that because it has become a matter of constitutional amendment, it requires the concurrence of two-thirds of the states of the Federation. The lobbying has to go to the Governors Forum so that they will not use their instrumentality to muzzle these various state houses of assembly towards rejection of the proposal by the National Assembly. And once that is done, then we can say that it will go through. And but I think, as a person, that we may not support that move because of the nature of things in Nigeria. We have to first sanitize the system before we allow the appeal to end at the Court of Appeal. For me,
all right.
That
unfortunately, our time is up. Fred Nzako, lawyer, public affairs analyst, thank you so much for your time on the program.